The building itself, we created like a mini solar chimney. So we have an openable ring of windows that automatically open at temperature heights. So it's too hot, they all open and the hot air goes out. And then it pulls at the bottom, there is vents, they pull cool air in. So the building breathes literally. We only artificially cool the seats of the viewers, not the building, which is also amazing. So, these kind of things are like really interesting to work on.
As you know, I have a very clear mission with Building Green. And I know so many brilliant architects, interior designers, and contractors who do too. But they're still stuck working on projects that drain them, with clients who don't value what they bring. That's why we founded Market Your Architecture over a year ago. It's a marketing agency that helps mission-driven designers attract better clients, charge what they are worth, and finally build the kind of portfolio that reflects who they really are. If that sounds like the shift you need, there's a link in the description to marketyourarchitecture.com. And before we jump into the podcast, please rate and subscribe. It really helps me reach more people like you. In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipp, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Winka is the kind of architect who doesn't just think in buildings, she thinks in systems, processes, performance, and the future. Trained in the Netherlands and now leading the pioneering architecture studio Archi-Tectonics in the US, she spent 3 decades proving that sustainability and design aren't separate disciplines, they're actually inseparable. From the Sponge City masterplan for the Asian Games in China to small residential townhouses in New York City, Winka creates projects that breathe, cool themselves, and even host wildlife. What stands out most is her refusal to separate beauty from performance or design from science. In this episode, we talk about what it means to build architecture that collaborates with nature, why working with manufacturers before contractors can radically change a building, and why she once designed a stadium with 8,000 unique shingles, all laser-etched, numbered, and bent into place. Winka, it's a pleasure having you here today. I want to start talking about your journey. How did you get where you are today? What made you want to go deeper into sustainability?
Interestingly enough, I studied in the Netherlands and then missed some theoretical, intellectual basis, I felt like in Europe. So I came to the US to do a postgrad in architecture. And that kind of helped me underbuild things in a more theoretical way. That sounds far away from sustainable, but it's kind of not, because I feel like architecture is one of those really beautiful professions that is integrating a lot of other professions. And so we tend to think very holistically. And I always felt it was really important to build that out as much as we could. But I also realized when I started building in New York City, so I studied in Columbia University, worked for Pete Eisenman, Toomey, Stephen Hall, realized then I probably should start my own office. And then, because you get raised in a country, and our country in Holland, of course, is, as you know, below sea level. So we have windmills pumping water out on a permanent basis, really. We have funny relationships with where the water is and where the land is. So you could say the collective memory of the Dutch is based on this idea of hydrology, dealing with nature, dealing with the force of nature in a way that is understanding nature really as something to be respected and to be negotiated with. So that collective energy, collective memory, of course, I took with me to the US. And when I started my first building, which is the one with the folded glass on 497 Greenwich in Soho in Manhattan, I, out of total kind of, I guess, building education, understanding these facts I just said, I immediately developed the building as passive solar energy, used renewable materials for building systems, recycled materials for the windows. I found a company that kind of uses regrown wood or reuses wood that was discarded. Um, and this is 94, you know, when no one was discussing in the US anything sustainable. And I never talked about it because typically in Europe and in the US, green architects were not considered serious architects because at that time it was people who didn't really like design, or design was for them the antidote to being green. And I think now we finally ended up in a period where we understand that architecture being this holistic profession, that we can design something, be sustainable, think about new building materials and recycling and upcycling and things like that, and understanding to keep existing buildings, to keep the carbon footprint in place. You know, all these things really are like now being discussed, but we always did. Like that first building, Greenwich Street, we kept the existing warehouse of 6 stories and then built a big L-shaped new building around it of 11 stories. So yeah, it's kind of, I guess it's in my nature. I can't help it.
I love how you helped people open their minds and show them that it's possible to create something sustainable that's also beautiful and functional. That's really cool. And you mentioned you worked for a few big names before starting your own firm. Who do you think was your biggest mentor?
You know, I always say I learned from all of them what to do and what not to do. You know, like because we all are human and have very different approaches. So learned a lot from all of them. Um, I feel close to them because they were for many years my mentors. I was super grateful to Eisenman because I did come to the US for this like quest to think about architecture in a wider range, to understand what is our field, what is our intellectual capital, like how do I fit in there, like what do other people think, no, like what is that. And that curiosity was great at Eisenman's office, who every summer would take an article or a book he wrote, and or his writing actually was going on as we spoke. And then with the whole office, we discuss this issue. He would provide lunch for us, and then we'd have this incredible intellectual discussion. And given that was probably only 4 hours in a whole year, but to me, that was amazing because that's why I came to US, you know, and to me that has really stayed, that generosity. And you know, he's not known as a necessarily in that way, but that's also why I want to bring it up, because I think he was in that way incredibly caring and sharing, and really understanding us as, you know, understanding us staff as grown-ups that had an opinion, and he was valuing that. And yeah, it's made a big difference to us.
That's beautiful. And now you've led Archi-Tectonics for over 3 decades already.
I
What's the
know.
origin story of the studio and what is your mission today?
Well, you know, it's funny because I studied in Holland and I was already working. Worked with an office that was called Beware of Architects, BOA. And we worked a lot with Rem Koolhaas. So I was very early on kind of contracted. And, you know, I worked in this office that built a lot, but then I also dealt with Rem, who had his anxieties and discussions and amazing attitude towards architecture. So I think I do feel very lucky that I had the chance to work with so many people that that were amazing thinkers. and really understood architecture in a very different way than just a money-making profession, which is also not the best example, probably, of a money-making profession. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting way to think about that way. They all had interesting ways of dealing with sustainability, also very different. Like you can think of sustainability also very differently, right? It can be a human factor, it can be an environmental factor, it can be an urban kind of factor, it can be planet. So there is a really and they all had different approaches to that. So that was interesting.
You work on huge projects that make cities more resilient. You even have material production and like you go across all scales. What does sustainability mean to you?
Well, for me, I love rezoning. I do. I rezone in buildings. I negotiate with city governments because I think zoning is for safety and common sense, light and air, rights of citizens, right? But within that, every particular situation has a very particular quest. So when we, for example, we won the competition for the Asian Games, which is the Olympics for the Asian countries in Hangzhou, China. The question of the government was really interesting because they had a 47 hectare or 116 acre site, 1.6 kilometers long. And they wanted that to be a sponge city, which means it absorbs, retains, and filters and oxygenates rainwater and stormwater for the city, so the city doesn't flood. But they also wanted it to be 85% park while requesting 200,000 square meter, which is about 2 million square foot of buildings. So that was a complete impossibility. If you think about that, that is kind of crazy. So we in the office, my business partner Justin Korhammer and we decided to go in equal partners with the landscape architects and the structural and sustainable engineers. So that the sustainable and structural engineers were Thornton Tomasetti and a landscape architect was Melk, a Dutch company that's also based in New York. And we went in together, which meant that we designed this park like holistically. Everything went up in the same time. The buildings, nature, landscape, structures, sustainability, everything was one big discussion between the three companies. And we went in the competition with like some big ideas that were half breaking the rules of the competition, which, is a decision we had to take as a team. For example, we really wanted the building. So we said, if the government is this visionary to keep this park 85% park and a sponge city, we should do the same with the buildings. We should have the same ambition for the buildings. So we proposed the buildings to be hybrids. 2 weeks for the Asian Games, the Olympics, completely designed, according to Olympic rules. But then after that, to be a cultural building for the city. And we did the same for the park. So the park, yes, it's for the Olympics, but we incorporated playgrounds, skate parks, outdoor auditoriums, sport fields, everything we thought the neighborhood needed. And then the underground shopping mall that was part of the program, we said, let's make that a connective valley because the park was bifurcated by a road and a river. So we proposed an aqueduct and a viaduct and had this green valley dipping under the road and river to connect the two halves of the park and the two stadiums that are then future cultural buildings. And then, so now the underground shopping mall has the sky as a roof. So it takes no lighting, no artificial lighting, no artificial cooling. But then we had glass pavilions with green roofs kind of occupying the valley, and under the edges of the valley were, of course, shops and galleries and cafes and restaurants and a comedy club and an art gallery, and really great combination. A Starbucks, which is a little shocking. And so that became really an artery for a lifeline for the park, but also for the neighborhood. And that way we could guarantee that this would always be a lively and like a live area. And then we provided solar panels for the lighting because the valley, is a little deep, so you need always to be lit. So we provided solar energy for that. And then, yeah. So it was a really interesting one. Now we're working on a big master plan in Tirana in Albania. And it was also interesting because we got a proposal to uh, make an area of maybe 200,000 square meters also. Actually, it's funny, it's the same amount. But this year, part of it's underground. So let's say above ground, 140,000 square meters. So 1.4 million square feet. And it was 12 stories high. So when we lay that out, it was a concrete desert. And we were like, oof, that sounds really painful. And we were looking at the site, and one side is flanked by the boulevard going from the airport to the city, and the other side is a beautiful residential neighborhood. So first I was looking at it and I was like, I can make these 12-story blocks look pretty, but it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be horrible. So we swept all the square feet up in towers along the highway, buffering the sound to the area behind, lower buildings towards the residential area, and we still had lots of ground left for an urban forest. So now the towers look out in the back over an urban forest, low housing around the urban forest, playgrounds inserted, things like that, a shopping mall on the front courtyard, back courtyard, all residential, middle boulevard with green. So we try to kind of really bring back green into the city, buffer the sound of the highway for acoustics, and to have glamorous living in the towers, but still looking out one way over the mountains and the other side over this urban forest. So kind of, and it was funny, we submitted that after a week to the client, and we said like, do you think this is too crazy to propose to the city? And they're like, oh my God, we love this, please do. So I proposed it to the city council of Tirana and the government of Albania, and they were like, fine, perfect, do it. So it was
That's so
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
architecture is just so great when you combine functionality with, you had the sound blockers, then you had towards the residential place or towards the residential area, you have the lower buildings, then you bring in forests. When it really starts to live, right?
Yeah. 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 And at the same time, you do these things like in the Asian games, you absorb the rainwater, you kind of self-irrigate the area around it. It's important to do these things because, like the one thing also in Asian games was very important we brought back the local vegetation to bring back local birds and insects and really restore the biome. And this is a thing we have to start thinking that is an absolute given. It's no longer enough to just make sustainable buildings. We need to make our cities back into local biomes and make sure we have urban forests and that we bring back local life because, spraying cities with insecticides at night, bad for the inhabitants, bad for the plants, bad for the insects, but birds die. So we have no birds in the US in most cities because we spray cities with insecticides. It's the worst thing you can do.
I want to keep talking about the Asian Games project. I think it's a fantastic project. And one thing that I find extremely interesting about these Olympic Games projects is that they are so huge and they're actually meant to be temporary, but we always
Yeah.
manage to make them permanent. From a design perspective, where did you start? Did you start with the temporary or did you start with the permanent project?
Well, there was one of them was definitely supposed to be temporal. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I ignored that. So in the office, we said hybrids. We're going to make 3 hybrids, the 2 stadiums hybrid and the shopping mall hybrid. So shopping mall is a hybrid with the Green Valley. The field hockey stadium we made as a land art piece. So we we dip it into the park, the playing field, and then have a very low shading wing that was very lightweight. that shades the viewers, the players, but also the glass entry of the lobby, let's say, of the stadium. And that became that's the community center now. And of course, outdoor concerts and outdoor cinema. And still also, we made the field big enough so you could play between field hockey, but also soccer because, it's more exciting to have more. So the field is an oval and the wing is an oval. So from the top, you see these two ovals intersecting. And then the other stadium was a table tennis stadium and breakdance. So they have in the Olympics in Asia breakdance and table tennis, which was amazing. And that's now the concert hall. And what we realized design wise is if you design a stadium just as a standard stadium, it's not a hybrid. It looks from the outside exactly like it looks from the inside. It's a singular building. It's the temporal quality makes it often cheap and not nice. So when we proposed to make this a hybrid, what's actually the most surprising for us was that the government then said, we will build it better. So they gave us a better budget. So that, and then we designed it really as we called it not a typology. So the typology was stadium, but the hybrid needed, according to us, a taxonomy. Taxonomy comes from biology and it's more dynamic, right? So we realized that if you have a concert hall and a stadium, they need to look like a hybrid. They need to look like something more dynamic. So we started designing it really like a hybrid. We intersected the inner bowl and the outer bowl to get much more fluid infrastructures inside, but also the infrastructures going outside on balcony. We started to create like a raised balcony on the outside for when it was a concert hall. We started intersecting the surfaces. So two surfaces are, because they're both double curved, they're like, one is clad with brass shingles that is actually recycled aluminum with a thin layer of brass. And then the other part is a double curved diagrid, steel diagrid with glass shards on it. And the glass shards we kept planar so that we could make them double glazing to be sustainable and made tiny little eyelets for them to negotiate it back to the curved surface so that you get this beautiful, almost fish scale like kind of glimmer in the facade and it's not flat. So yeah, and funny enough, all these things we thought of were to make it faster, to make it cheaper. We saved 20 tons of steel in the overall production of the buildings. We saved 20% of the construction time. And so we worked with the BIM people. Every decision we actually took also for aesthetic reasons were mostly to save money and construction time. So it was super exciting. It was like playing chess, like what can we do to make this more efficient, more sustainable, cheaper, faster, which is a really incredible thing to do. It's very fun to work like that.
That's so cool. You
Yeah.
sound like the big visionary behind it. And
Well, there's a whole office behind me.
How many people were
Yeah.
working on the project?
We had three offices, right? So we had a whole structural office, a whole landscape office. I think in each office, the structural team was probably 4 structural engineers, 4 sustainability engineers. Then we had landscape, 6 to 8 people. We were about 12 to 15 people. And then we had the whole BIM team in China and the local architects. So yeah, I mean, if we had construction meetings in China, it was 40 to 50 people on the table.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the
Crazy.
interior of the stadium, you used bamboo, right?
Yeah, because Hangzhou is the biggest bamboo forest, and bamboo can create an oxygen and absorbing carbon in 7 years, what takes it 340. Plus trees we need for our biome. We need the old forests to survive. The forests are our biggest carbon sink together with the oceans. We cannot keep chopping trees down. Bad idea. We need to start using bamboo. Regrows also much faster.
Just earlier this week, I had a conversation for the podcast with an architect in Thailand, and he specializes in creating beautiful big bamboo structures. And he said the biggest misconception about bamboo is that people just harvest the younger bamboo outside, which is actually just food. It's just sugar. And the bamboo parts that are really, really strong or stronger than steel are the old ones, which are not even a year old, the ones from the middle. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Which architect was that?
Marcus Rosleep.
Ah, you also need to speak to Patrick Keane, who
Okay.
does unbelievable structures. Yeah, also in bamboo, also in Thailand. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I will reach out to him. From a design standpoint, what was the hardest thing for you to pull off in a project this big and complex?
Convincing the client is always the hardest, right? Like that is, we were very, very, very lucky that the client was completely enamored with the brass oval set of wobbly discs stadium and the valley, because it was very hard to pull off that valley. When we proposed that, the first thing the city said is like, we have the main drain under that road, and the main drain is a diameter of, 10 feet, 3 meters, something like that. So we were like, oh, oops, we have to go 3 meters deeper with our valley. So we were trying to figure this out, made the valley longer because the slope can never be more than, it's allowed legally. But a fire truck still has to go under because it's also fire. So the funny thing of doing hybrids is that you make landscape, nature, infrastructure all in once. So it's both a building and an infrastructure. So it has to have fire trucks and pedestrian egress in the same time. So it was kind of you made kind of a monster, right? Like you completely create like the most difficult situation ever. Anyway, so we were doing that, and then we came back to China for the next meeting, and they're like, "We have good news and bad news, and what do you like first?" I was like, "Good news." The pipe was gone. The drain pipe was, they'd moved it. I was like, "Oh God, this is fantastic." So we'd go back to the original design, which was much better. And yeah, but that was crazy difficult.
What was the bad news?
I don't remember. I was so excited about the pipe. I don't think the bad news was that important. It was, I don't remember.
And what's the part you're most proud of now if you go back to visit it?
Well, what I'm most proud of is the fact that the city has taken over that park. I mean, they're camping, they're doing Tai Chi and yoga and some strange dance with 300 people at a time. And they are using the sport fields and the community center. They're teaching students, little tiny kids. When I was there to photograph it, like 3 classes of kids, maybe 8 to 11, walked in and they were getting a class on what is a sponge city and, the importance of thinking like that. And I was like, oh, we have to start doing this in the US. This is amazing. They had a whole exhibit on what our principles were of, doing the sponge city. We had created wetlands, bioswales, porous pavement, lots of info to make the park also porous to the neighborhood. We had every street had an entrance to the park. So the park itself was very porous and very accessible. Yeah, and they were getting a class. So to me, the best thing is that what we wanted to be for the city is really, really accepted, adopted by the city, and they voted it their favorite park in Hangzhou. So they're the best favorite park in Hangzhou, which is very sweet.
Oh, that's so cool. Congrats. And you said before you called it a big monster. And when you look at the pictures now, it's this beautiful, calm,
Idyllic, I
full of,
know.
yeah, idyllic park.
Yeah. No, but I mean with monsters, you create a building that is landscape architecture and infrastructure, like the valley. No, the valley is both a road. It is a traffic. It's a shopping mall. It has all kinds of things going on. It has nature. It has misting devices. It needs drainage because it's low. All these things together, really complex to figure out. And that was the monstrous part. For us, we had created our own monster, but I think because we were working together with the structure engineers and the landscape architects so tightly, it really worked out beautifully. I think, I'm very proud of our collaboration.
Just a quick reality check. If you're constantly over delivering, working around the clock, and still chasing the right kind of projects, you're not alone. I keep meeting architects, interior designers, and contractors in that exact cycle, which is actually why we started Market Your Architecture. We help you reposition your work and get in front of more of the right people so you can finally choose who you want to work with. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to know more about us, you'll find the link to marketyourarchitecture.com in the description. So if we look back at the several scales, from planning resilient cities to digital manufacturing, what are for you the non-negotiables across all scales to make sure a project is going to be sustainable?
Yeah, I think, I've always been concerned if we build a building, what is a healthy, good environment for us as people, right? Like and then how is the building a good collaborator in the city? So, but health and sustainability really go hand in hand. So I feel what is healthy for us is actually sustainable. So it's an interesting intertwining that's not talked about a lot, but ultimately for me, it's like, what is the healthy environment for the inhabitants of the building? And what is the best way for them to live in this building? And how do we get amazing lighting? And we did a really fun kind of tall, 8-story townhouse in Soho recently where we put a climate skin around it. So in summer, when you can shade it, there's also balconies on every floor and roof terraces, and the climate skin is not 2D. It's a 3D volume that goes way bigger than the building, and it goes up, over, and down. So it shades the back skylight over the stairs, and it shades the whole roof deck, and then it shades the front. And that saves 45% of the energy costs of the building in a year, without doing any, heating and cooling. So you can get that building almost into a passive cooling and heating state because you use solar, because we have so much sun in New York. You can use the solar energy in the winter, and in the summer you can close the screens and cool it that way. And we have natural ventilation. There's a draft between the facade and the skin. So I think these kind of things are all very healthy because you can open your doors, you have shading, you can put plants on the balconies. They hold the humidity and they cool your environment down. So it's very fun because when we made it, there was no plants, and a photographer walked by the other day and took for me very generously a photo for free, very famous photographer, and sent it to me. And he's like, "Look how your building is transforming. It's so nice. It's like a little forest now, a vertical forest." So it's kind of sweet to see how these buildings transform and grow. And, for me, I like small and big projects. I mean, I spend as much time probably on the small project than I do on the big ones.
So, how do I build a house in New York as unsustainable as possible?
Unsustainable.
Yes.
Well, all the buildings in New York are unsustainable. There's a ton of really horrible skyscrapers with foam facades, that is super toxic, that have no mass whatsoever, are incredibly fast in heating and cooling, as in from the outside, take tons of energy to maintain. We have a lot of those very cheap developer buildings in the world, I think. So if you make a building that has no skin, no mass, it's a mess.
And cheap so that they don't last long. And we
Yeah,
have
they
to
have they have
replace
sadly a
them.
time, like I think something like 25 years, and then they need a new skin.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
was shocked, anyways. Well, I studied at ETH in Switzerland, and I was shocked when I started with the podcast and I started interviewing people from the US. And, I guess it's the same for you. When we build in Europe, we think about the next 50 to 100 years.
Yeah, totally.
And
Yeah.
here it's totally normal to build for the next 15 years.
Yeah. Scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's also like, this is the thing where regulations are very important. Cities and countries should not allow that because it is unsustainable. Also, if you buy your apartment and after 25 years it falls apart. I had actually a client, a friend of mine bought a whole floor in that tower. That's why I know about the Eiffels. And they were like, we like to hang the fridge, big fridge, from the wall. And I started laughing and said, you don't have a wall. If I do this, I can do this, but I have to weld a steel frame in the building frame and then build a solid wall in the outside wall, and then I can hang it. And they said, okay, do that. So I literally welded a big steel frame in the building frame and built a wall for them, and then I could hang the fridge.
Why do they hang the fridge?
They like, if you hang your kitchen, you can clean the floor. And
Okay.
it looks very spacious because it looks bigger,
Uh-huh.
but also it's clean. You can clean under everything.
That's so
It's
cool.
a smart idea. It's just I'd never done it before either. I mean, I've never thought of hanging a fridge. It's like, wow.
So let's go back to talking about the regulations. I think that's an interesting topic to go deeper into. What do you see as responsibilities that the government has or the city has versus what do you think is okay for homeowners to take responsibilities on?
Well, I think it's a different thing. When you build your own house, you create your own problem, right? I mean, hopefully you don't do anything toxic that is bad for whatever. Hopefully you think about energy saving just because we need to share and care. The problem is the bigger buildings is really where we should have major regulations to make sure that there's no off-gassing, there's green architecture, that things are like using very little or no energy, like make buildings that can be net zero or, at least geothermal or whatever. So these things are all not that hard. And I think what's helpful is a lot of developers and owners don't really understand that technology. So if the city gives better incentives or the country gives better incentives, people are more inclined to use it, and then you can rapidly improve everything. So I think by supporting green building, the city can do a lot because developers love discounts, and that's why although I'm not a big fan of LEED, it actually was incredibly helpful, made for much better buildings because LEED basically stipulated you use green materials, you get a subsidy. And the subsidy was good. So then we actually got much, much better buildings that used way less energy very fast. And that was only one small incentive of a subsidy, but that made all the difference. A very big
Mm-hmm.
difference. Yeah.
Did you see, you mentioned at the beginning that you started working on sustainable projects before that was even a thing. Do you think a lot changed when certificates like Lee started showing up just
Yeah.
because it became more popular? Yeah.
It started making a difference for the developers who make the big buildings, and that's where the impact also happens because, a small house is very easy to get it off the grid. My own house has solar panels and a battery, and my car drives off the same battery, and, it's all very easy, right, for a house. But yeah, for a big building, it takes incentives and subsidies and things like that. But then it pays back to the city in a big way.
Winka, you mentioned using 3D parametric softwares, and I know you lead advanced design labs. What are some of the practices or tools that you rely on most to stay ahead?
Everything. The really fantastic thing of digital is that it's cross-platform. So we design in Rhino, which is original. It is industrial design uh, software. So it means you can detail everything. we tend to work with manufacturers before we go to contractors, which means we can develop something super efficient that is made off-site. It's much cleaner, saves a ton of material, also better for the city. So we develop the systems usually with a manufacturer, then go to the contractor and say, well, this folded glass facade looks complex, but this and this person can make it, and this is how much it is. So we take that. We take that responsibility. We did actually a book because Akhtar, the publisher of Akhtar, noticed when he came for a studio visit that I was explaining how we work with manufacturers before contractors. He's like, I've never heard anyone do that. Like, what do you mean? I was like, well, it just makes the building better and the contractor doesn't overcharge because it looks complex. So he actually said to us, you should do a book about this, which is our book, Strange Objects. And the strange objects comes from the weird logic of working between industrial design and architecture or between manufacturers and contractors. And we think it's the best way to kind of fast improve not only buildings, but also aesthetics and create new systems and not be dependent on big old ugly mullions, which I can't stand. So that's been a really good way for us to advance the way we do buildings, and it's really fun because manufacturers, once you work with them, then if they have a new material, they contact us and they're like, "Hey, would you like to do something with translucent stone?" That was another building we did. So you use the teeny weeniest bit of stone that is either laminated on glass, then it's translucent, or on honeycomb, then it's like very lightweight. So we minimize using the resources, but we make a super insulated facade. So the glass is still double glazing, the panels are still insulated. But that way you can really also calibrate in a sort of a pixelation the level of privacy for the building, the level of sun exposure, the level of whatever, and you kind of calibrate in and out, which is really nice. And the softwares we use are just basically parametrics to optimize facades, like, for example, the stadium facade with the planar slivers. But then it goes into BIM. Our BIM guys, the client got so into this building that he demanded that every shingle was calculated, which I used shingles because I thought is easy. You can just overlap them on these double curved surfaces and you don't have to calculate anything. He was like, no, 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 we're going to calculate them. So they bent them all. And so the BIM guy eventually had 8,000 shingles that he managed to make in only 85 different shapes. And all of them were like laser engraved in the back with numbers. And that's like
Wow.
precision. Yeah, that's serious precision. So it's really nice that through the different models, the 3D model from Rhino, super precise, then goes into BIM, helps him doing that. And then so it trickles through the building itself. We created like a mini solar chimney. So we have an openable ring of windows that automatically open at temperature heights. So it's too hot, they all open and the hot air goes out. And then it pulls at the bottom, there is little vents, they pull cool air in. So the building breathes literally. And that helped us we only artificially cool the seats of the viewers, not the building, which is also amazing. So, these kind of things are like really interesting to work on. And these softwares, basically, because they are multi-platform, they go from us to the engineers to the factory. So we don't give 2D drawings to anyone except for finally the contractor. But between all the manufacturers and the contractors and the engineers initially and the BIM guys is all the same 3D model that we create in the office.
I love that you go beyond the traditional approach of directly working with a contractor, but that you involve more, let's say, inventors that want to invent something smarter and better. And you have an entire section on your website around smart envelopes. What's your favorite one of those?
For now, of course, or the last one. So the one I really love is the double curve diagrid because we actually got them to not put columns behind. And most of the diagrids you see in the world, because a die grid already uses 20% less steel. But if you then put big columns behind, you just waste that energy. You just, and people are afraid of it. But a die grid's super strong because it is already in itself all triangles, right? So we were very proud that we actually don't have columns in the outer ring of the stadium. So the lobby is column free and has just all these bulgy surfaces, which is fantastic. So that is now my favorite for now, but until we think of a next one. We're figuring out some really cool ones right now in Albania. So maybe, once those are built, I have a new favorite.
You know what I love about architects that whenever I ask about their favorite project, it's always the newest.
Yeah, because it's the thing you just fell in love with and figured out. And, it's a lot of work to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And then if, motivating the people to actually build it how you want, it's
Hmm.
probably the hardest part, not the figuring out.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, you have such a passionate, captivating energy. I totally understand how you can sell your idea to so many people and get them involved to make it happen. That's a really
I try.
powerful trait.
Yeah, I try. It's always a challenge, but yeah. I think, what I often say to our students is as long as you have an argument why you think it's really important to do this, if you have an argument, it's 99% sure you get it. If you don't have an argument, they value engineer it out.
You mean if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it? Or
No,
how
you
do
have
you
to have
mean
an
that?
argument. You have to have an argument why it's a better solution than just
Mm-hmm.
a standard up and down building.
Mm-hmm.
My argument for the diagrid and the whatever, it saved us a lot of material. It was cheaper, faster, difficult to engineer. But once you have it engineered, it is a win-win on all levels. So I have to give that story, and then the client was listening, and so basically over my shoulder said, "You do what Winka wants." And that's what you need. You need your client to back you up. And so thanks to that client, it really all happened. It wasn't thanks to us, it was thanks to that client.
I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with clients who don't want to invest in sustainability? But I guess you just gave me the answer to that.
Well, also, I just specify it. I don't ask. I don't specify anything else. I just specify what I think they should use. So if they want to value engineer it, sometimes they do, most of the time they actually don't. But I don't talk about it necessarily as being only green. I talk about it being better in
Mm-hmm.
all levels better.
Mm-hmm. That's
That
cool.
helps. And with bamboo, of course, it's very easy. I was like, it's next door. It's a great material. So we have it for the floors, we have it for the walls, furniture, desks, everything is bamboo. Bamboo is beautiful.
You said you love rezoning. What are three rules you always break when designing at a city scale?
Well, I think one is like you want to make sure you have enough green space and outdoor space for everyone. One, because it's good for people to have that, but two, is it adds green zones, add natural cooling, and the moisture in the air is better and cleans, plants clean the pollution. So that is really important to me. I always try and get an urban forest or climbing forest or whatever. I think it's really important to think about sound and sound absorption. Like, for example, Asian Games, we use the zero earth principle, which means everything we excavated for wetlands, bioswales, the valley, we then put on the parking garages, and we have 4 earth buildings. So we had 3 hybrids and 4 earth buildings. So earth buildings are not buildings with green roofs. Earth buildings are where nature wins. It's a forest and it has tucked under a building. So it's like very different. you see maybe a sliver of a facade, but most of it. And then the synthetic, we call it synthetic nature. So the synthetic nature on the top is a forest, but then has teeny weeny glass bubbles everywhere because this skylights to give light to the building below. So it's a total blur of what is building and nature, but nature still wins. But the zero Earth policy was really great because it allowed us to make 20-meter hills in the park, and that totally stopped the sound of the city. So in the park, it doesn't just look idyllic; it's quiet. It's amazing. You just hear birds. It's an amazing,
Wow.
amazing effect. And berms are underused. Earth berms. We do it a lot in Europe. Earth berms along highways. Major solution to because the plants clean the pollution, the sound is stopped. You get nicer looking highways. So yeah, I mean, countries like China and India are actually amazing because all the raised highways they used to hang plants from. They have all these vines climbing, crawling over everything. So they all look like big green arteries. And for some reason here we don't do that, but that's really great because it allows birds to occupy the underbelly of a highway or makes a big difference.
That's beautiful. Winka, you have been a visiting professor at Harvard and you're still a professor at the University in Pennsylvania, but you're also designing iconic buildings and projects of all scales. What are you still curious about, or what is next for you that still excites you, like the first project you did?
Oh, funny enough, I actually chair at Penn, University of Pennsylvania for 10 years. So created a lot of new programs, labs, a lot of labs those were the laboratories you were mentioning, in robotics, in biomatter, in nanotechnology, in material ecologies, in sustainability, energy systems, whatever. So we had a lot of labs. And I thought it was part of my job to get architecture closer to science because I think in the US we have this weird preconceived idea that architecture is design. But to be honest, if any one of us looks at our practice, 10% is design, 90% is trying to get that design implemented in the best possible way, in the most smart way, in the most sustainable way. So 90% is science, 10% is design. And I think the misconception of architecture in the US is that it's easy, everyone can do it, which makes total no sense. It's like we do so many things that are nothing to like rezoning is design, but it's more than design. It's trying to make the city better, make a healthier environment, more beautiful environment. And currently, I'm actually not at Penn. I am the director and CEO of SciArc. That's why I put that under my name.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry.
so I'm running a whole new school. Yeah, I moved to LA, so I'm currently in LA. Um, and the office is still in New York, so I'm bi-coastal a little bit. But we're starting an office here also, so yeah, hopefully it'll be easier soon. But yeah, I think I see that partially as my academic part to help change how architects are conceived and to give more agency to architecture, but also to give the architect him or herself more agency and to help them understand that the scientific part is super important and it will help you make better design. And design is our tool. I'm totally design driven, but if you don't understand that needs a serious underbelly of science, then I think you don't have agency. You need to have agency. You need to be the expert in what you're doing. And if you're not the expert, then everyone's going to run over you. So we train our students a lot to how to explain their projects, how to do the research. That's why the labs, to give them a lot of understanding of not AI only as a design sketch tool, but really understanding how you can control AI. Because AI you can train, right, as everyone knows, but not much talked about. So how do you train the AI to be a great design tool and to be a better analytical tool is really important. We have that very much here at SciArc, probably one of the only ones that does that in depth and writes their own software and stuff. So I think, this is to me really, and this is where I think we can start to also talk to city governments and country governments maybe. When I was at Penn, Tom Main worked with Obama to look at the state of the American cities. And he asked 3 schools to work with him. One of them was Penn. And we looked at the state of the cities at the edge. He was looking at the states of the state of the cities in the middle. And then someone else was doing kind of the middle band towards Canada. And it was super interesting. And that went back to Obama, that research. So that was, one of the few presidents we've had here who were very interested in the overall state of the country rather than, the 3 important cities or 4. So it's really, I gave a talk at the UN last Monday, on housing. I'm very interested in how we can improve the world as architects, but also how we can improve our profession to be more vocal and to be more considered as experts rather than designers. So yeah, working on it.
Beautiful. I have a personal question. You seem like a total role model for me, and I'm sure for many other people too. What's your secret? How do you work on so many different important big projects and you keep your radiant energy and the joy in it?
Well, that goes up and down. But I think when I was young, I realized I was going in a male profession. And I made a promise to myself that I would never be bitter about that because it was my choice. I was a grown up, my choice. So I've kept a sense of humor throughout every contractor meeting, every whatever. And I think people feel that you don't have a hang up about it. So those things dissolve very quickly then. It's not a work wise. People ask me, how do I do a 100% job twice? I always say, well, the only thing I can't add right now is teaching because I love to teach, but I can do teaching and a practice, or I can run a school and a practice. But teaching, practice, and school is 3 full-time jobs. It's impossible. I mean, that totally erases me. I tried that at Penn and it killed me. So I lost my sense of humor, which I have usually pretty stable. But yeah, I think part of it is promises, making promises to yourself. I am big on that. So when I was young, I decided that. And also in general, I don't count. I don't count like hours here, hours there. I try to do everything fluidly integrated and give everything the right amount of attention. But then I have great people around me and just really trusting other people and inspiring them and making them feel like they're a valid part of the team makes that it happens. No, it's not me. It's like really amazing team around me, both in the office, my business. I got a business partner when I became chair. So for many years I had my own office, but then the office was when I became chair, the office came to me and they're like, what are you thinking for the future? And I was like, good idea, good question. So yeah, I was very happy that Justin Kornhammer decided in 2016 he was willing to join. And that has helped enormously because, you need people on your side. You need to be able to delegate and step away, know that things are still running. It's a work in progress, believe me. It's not perfect. It's taking a lot of humor, sometimes apologizing. It's not perfect, but it is in general, I think, for me, a really inspiring and great way, but it takes a lot of support and great people.
So taking a strong decision, being surrounded by the right people, and being present to give every task or project the attention it deserves. and not losing humor. I'm going to write those down. That was such an inspiring conversation, Winka. Thank you so much. If our listeners want to follow your work, where can they find you?
Instagram, LinkedIn, our website, archi-tectonics.com, which is in New York, not to be confused with Archi-Tectonica, which is in Florida. Very different office. And we send newsletters. So if people are interested, you just email us and we happily send a newsletter. We don't send many. We only send 2 a year, but it's nice. We try and share things we find or make or, what we like try both in the academic world and the practice world. We try and share, be very open source. So we're willing to share anything with anyone. So if you're interested, on our website there's an email and that comes straight to the partners. So we are not very hard to reach, but it might take a moment.
Perfect. I will link those in the description of the episode. Thank you so much, Winka.
Thank you, Ladina. Super fun to talk to you. Great questions. Made me think. It's always interesting to have a good dialogue. Thank you very much too.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at Ladina Schipf. Thanks.